A fully grown woman allegedly posed as a teenager enrolling in multiple high schools in the Boston area. Now, people close to her are being called out. Were they duped as well, or were they part of this alleged con? We're discussing these latest developments with forensic psychiatrist Dr. Danielle Bober. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. It is a truly bizarre case that we first told you about last December. It's that of Shelby Hewitt, a former social worker who entered a not guilty plea to 9 charges, including forgery and fraud. And for what? Well, Hewitt, who had attended college, had attended grad school, had worked for the Department of Children and Families while she was 32 years old, allegedly pretended to be a teenage student at 3 different schools during the 2022-2023 academic year. She resigned from DCF in February of 2023. And during that court hearing that I mentioned where she entered a not guilty plea, her lawyer said that Hewitt has this long documented history of mental health issues, but is getting treatment. And that's where this gets interesting too, because according to prosecutors, this scheme started more than 2 years ago. Hewitt allegedly pretended to be a child in need in DCF custody, but at the same time, she kept collecting her state salary of $54,000 a year. That's the allegation. Now there's an update in this about who might have known what she was up to, who might have been helping her, whether inadvertently or knew what was going on. I'll get into that in a second, but I want to bring on now Dr. Danielle Bober. He's back with us to discuss this case. Dr. Bober, you first spoke with us when Hewitt was charged last year. If you can once again give your take for the viewers and the listeners, what you think is happening here with Ms. Hewitt.
Well, it's definitely one of the more bizarre cases I've read about. It seems like Hewitt really engaged in a very intricate and organized scheme. So despite the fact that she may or may not have mental health problems, I mean, it seems like she really went through a lot of details to get this right. I guess not enough details because in the end she was caught. But, it's a very disturbing case, obviously, of not only just identity theft and fraud, but the fact that all these students that she came into contact with, may have been traumatized by her actions. So it's very concerning, obviously.
I want to get to that in a minute because there's that second part of this. But let's get to this new information because we now have new information that has come to light, and it concerns some of the people that were allegedly victimized by Hewitt's con. There's this woman and her partner who apparently took her in as a foster parent. I'm talking about therapist Rebecca Bernat. She opened her home to Hewitt, allowing her to live with her and her partner, John Smith. And before we get even further, Dr. Bober, just tell us, I'm assuming it's frowned upon and must be an ethical violation for a therapist to take in a patient and live with them?
Yes, this is what we would call a boundary violation, where someone is acting outside the nature of the therapeutic relationship. Now, whether that relationship was something that was sexual or exploitative, we don't know. Now, the couple are claiming that they had no idea who she was and what her true age was. We just don't know. But yes, it generally would be frowned upon in the therapeutic relationship to have someone move into your home with your partner. They did not go through the normal channels or the normal process. So she may have some answers for the state board of social work.
I'm assuming, Dr. Bober, then this happens a lot where maybe a patient attaches themselves to the doctor, the mental health professional, right?
Yes, I mean, and let's distinguish between what we call a boundary crossing or a boundary violation. A boundary crossing is generally not exploitative. It's done for therapeutic purposes, whereas a boundary violation can actually be damaging to the patient. Now, again, hypothetically, this was not necessarily a patient. This was someone who was pretending to be someone else, who was pretending to be a much younger person. But a lot of people speculate that they knew who she was and they knew her true age.
Right.
It's going to be up to them to try to prove otherwise.
Disturbing case, to say the least. And look, the truth is the world can be a scary place. And one of the scariest things, by the way, that can happen to you is if you get injured. But that's why I want to talk about Morgan & Morgan, our sponsor, America's largest injury law firm. This is a firm that has secured multi-million-dollar verdicts and settlements. This is a firm that makes it super easy for their clients through the whole process because From starting your claim to uploading documents to signing contracts to talking to your legal team, it can all be done from your smartphone. Seeing if you have a case only takes a few minutes. This is also a firm where there's no upfront fee. You only pay them if you win. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar or by dialing pound law, that's pound 529 on your phone. So let's get back to this. So Bernat worked for Walden Behavioral Care, but she since left. The facility has not said if she was fired or not, and reporting indicates that she still has a private practice. But investigators believe that Bernat had helped Hewitt enroll in local schools, first under the name Danielle Herrera when she was age 16, quotation marks, and then as Ellie Blake, age 13. Now, according to a school official, Bernat also advocated for special services for Hewitt at each school due to her alleged status as a traumatized teen. Now, when Hewitt was arrested, Bernat apparently was in disbelief. She reportedly told law enforcement that she really thought she was just helping a child in need. But the Boston Globe has done a lot of digging on this story, and they spoke with people from the schools that Hewitt allegedly conned her way into, and they're now questioning how deep Bernat's involvement in this goes. For example, a former employee at Walden Behavioral Care says that Hewitt's 2020 admission as a foster child to that facility was not the first time that Bernat had met Hewitt. No, she says Hewitt had previously been admitted into the adult unit at Walden under her real name at least twice, once in 2018 and then in 2020. The anonymous former employee had told the Globe that Bernat had called her by the name Shelby in staff meetings. But she also referred to her as Danielle, which the staff assumed was a pseudonym, possibly for privacy reasons. The Boston Globe also spoke with a woman named Liza Campiglio, a former patient at Walden, and she says that she shared a room with Hewitt in the adult unit, by the way, but for about a month. And this was back in 2019. And Campiglio says that Hewitt went by her real name and said that Hewitt would have these emotional fits, and Bernat was well aware of this. Now, through her attorney, Bernat has said she was completely fooled by Hewitt, that she didn't take part in enrolling Hewitt in local schools. She says that Hewitt independently did that. In an email to the Globe, Connie Tran, Bernat's lawyer, wrote, quote, Hewitt utilized various fabricated personas to deceive Walden, BPS, and Rebecca into believing she was in fact a child who was legally in DCF's custody. Rebecca did not facilitate Shelby Hewitt's enrollment into BPS. Rather, Hewitt undertook this action independently. But the Globe reports, quote, Boston school officials contest that information, saying Bernat played a significant role. They say Bernat was present either on Zoom or in person to complete enrollment paperwork in August of 2022 for 16-year-old Danielle Herrera, and then in June 2023 for 13-year-old Ellie Blake. Officials say Bernat's use of a second name in the school system, Ellie, raises questions about how certain she was about the truth of the first one, Daniela. So, Dr. Bober, what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's going to be very hard for Bernat to hide the fact that she knew Hewitt under her real name, because you've got all these witnesses that probably heard her use her real name in staff meetings. You're going to have forensics on social media, on cell phones, on computers that are all going to establish that Bernat facilitated or at least helped Hewitt in this scheme. Now, did she know what she was really helping her do? Was she engaged in the fraud? Or was she just simply assisting someone who she believed was a traumatized child? But it seems pretty clear that Hewitt and Bernat had a relationship prior to this, and that Bernat knew who Hewitt truly was and not under a pseudonym.
Well, that's the part I don't understand. So presuming for a moment that this is true, why would a mental health professional go to these lengths to help what is essentially a 32-year-old woman go to school?
Well, I think she's going to claim it's because she didn't believe she was a 32-year-old woman. She's going to say, I didn't know, which is really the only defense that she has.
But assuming she did know, assuming that she knew this, assuming she has this relationship with her, she had treated her in the past, right? Why would someone in her position of authority help a 32-year-old woman pretend to be a teenager, assuming that's true, taking that as true? Why would somebody do that?
Well, one of the reasons could be if they had some kind of inappropriate relationship and she was doing it to help her further this scheme. But again, we don't have any evidence of that. We don't know.
And is there any other mental health diagnosis that would suggest somebody in a position of authority would want to help somebody who's troubled? For example, if she said to her, you know, whatever the reasons were that Hewitt allegedly wanted to go to a school, and we can get into that a little bit more and explore that, a mental health professional in her position say, you know, I want to help her. I think this is in the best interests of her care. I mean, again, I'm trying to make sense of what is a situation that doesn't make sense.
It is very, very, it's almost incomprehensible. Not only Hewitt's behavior, but Bernat's behavior as well just doesn't seem to make sense. But both are saying essentially that there's things that we just don't know, especially Hewitt's attorney, who is saying that she has this long-standing history of mental illness that we're all going to hear about, which obviously is going to be critical to her defense.
Let me ask you this. If really she was duped, right, and some people are saying, how is it possible that she was duped when there was all this other information that she should have known who Hewitt was? Is there sometimes a situation where a mental health professional maybe won't question what a patient is saying, that they automatically take it as true, that they're not judging them, that they're more susceptible to believing to whatever is being told to them?
Well, you know, they often say that with people, you get two things, what they show you and what you want to see. Is it possible that Bernat was duped like many other people at the school were? Or was she simply involved in some other way? But, you know, I don't think there's a particular disorder where she would be influenced to the point where she would help her, knowing that she was doing something that was wrong.
Maybe
I
not
think it
even
was
a
something that was
diagnosis,
pretty
Dr.
volitional.
Goldberg. Maybe not even a maybe not even a diagnosis, but is it sometimes in your experience that mental health professionals, they want to be so open to what's being said to them by the patient that they don't take a second
That they overlook the evidence.
So they overlook it in a way, and not faulting them because they don't want to judge. They want to be open. They want to listen. That they're not really doing some second guessing about what's being told to them.
I think as mental health professionals, we are skewed to want to believe our patients, right? What are we there for? We're there to validate them. We're there to give them a voice. So by default, we want to believe them, and we don't want to really entertain the fact at times that maybe they're deceiving us. But yes, I would say by default, we do want to try to believe them and establish that rapport and trust.
Now, one of the things that's being reported is that Hewitt had apparently told Bernat that she was a victim of human trafficking as a child and that she needed to use an alias like Daniela. What do you make of that?
Listen, I mean, she used Daniela, she used Ellie, but the bottom line is that, you know, if you're Bernat, you need to be sensitive to the fact of what the optics are, of what the perception is going to be. So moving Hewitt into your home, which looks on its face to be exploitative, is something that she should have thought twice about.
And going back to this alleged scheme here, let's amplify this a little bit. So according to prosecutors, Hewitt had forged documents to keep this ruse going. Prosecutors say she had to forge all sorts of documents. She allegedly created her own website domain to send emails that looked very similar to the official DCF email address. She then pretended to be two different DCF workers, a Michael Kornetsky and a Michelle Delphi. She did that to get herself enrolled in both the Behavioral Treatment Center, which specialized in eating disorders, and the Boston Public Schools. According to the statement of facts in this case, Hewitt allegedly enrolled as a 16-year-old student at Jeremiah E. Burke High School in the fall of 2022, where she actually joined the girls' basketball team. She chose the number 32 for her jersey, which was her real age, and then she requested a transfer to Brighton High School. In June of 2023, she allegedly enrolled under a different name at English High School in Jamaica Plain, this time posing as a 13-year-old. And at one point, Hewitt is accused of using the Michelle Delphi email address to reach out to a school guidance counselor to notify them about claims of bullying. Yeah, Hewitt allegedly wrote, Ellie had a really bad day at school yesterday, cried all evening, and doesn't want to go back. Ellie is really sensitive about people commenting on her face and how she looks older. It's a huge trigger point for her. Now, Hewitt, posing as Delphi, by the way, that's the allegation, allegedly told the counselor that she suffered from a genetic medical condition that prematurely aged her, and that she also claimed to be a victim of child trafficking. Now, Dr. Bober, taking again all these allegations as true, is this a need to be seen as a victim? If we're trying to understand why someone would pose as a teenager to go back to school, was it to relive the glory days? Was it a need to feel as a victim? Was it a need? What other need there might be? I mean, we're trying to make sense of it. What do you take away from it?
It kind of reminds me of some of the psychopathology that goes in what we call Munchausen by proxy, that people have such a need for attention and need to be recognized in some way. And so they draw all these people in to their lives and they play the victim and they get some kind of gratification out of that. So that's possibly what's going on here.
By the way, how was she found out? Let me tell you. So the school apparently set up a plan to get this troubled kid back into the classroom, but they started to discover that there were a lot of inconsistencies with her registration paperwork. They couldn't find a birth certificate. They realized that the email address domain on the email from Michelle Delphi wasn't the right one. And reportedly, students started seeing discrepancies in her story too. Students that Hewitt had befriended said that they let these inconsistencies in her story slide because they believed her when she said she had been abused. But then other students found her yearbook photo from when she attended Sharon High School in 2007. So one of the things we have to remember, Dr. Bober, and you said this before, does this have an effect on the students too? This, what is essentially a crime and a ruse. That's what the allegation is.
It depends how much emotional investment these kids put in her. It seemed that she was an object of ridicule because she looked much older than her claimed age. But it could have traumatized them in some way that would be very difficult to prove. But if I am Hewitt's attorney, you're going to have a lot of trouble trying to say that she didn't know what she was doing. She didn't essentially know the difference between right and wrong because there were so many efforts that were made to conceal the crime, to hide the crime, that she clearly was very organized, very meticulous, and very scheming about her actions.
And let me ask you, again, have you ever seen a case like this in your practice, in your experience?
I have never seen a case precisely like this. I have seen other cases, for example, Munchausen by proxy, where parents will try to feign that their children are ill to get attention from the people around them. But no, I've never seen anything specifically like this, which is why I said in the beginning of the interview, this has to be one of the most bizarre cases I've seen in recent memory, because I've never seen anything like this. So it definitely stands on its own that way.
And do you have any possible potential diagnosis for what's happening here as a psychiatrist? What kind of questions you would be asking that you would suspect this could be?
So there apparently is a 3-year period of time before all this happened where Shelby Hewitt is off the map. She's off the radar. People don't know what she was doing. I would want to dig a little bit more into that. Were there prior psychiatric admissions? Did she see a psychiatrist? Were there diagnoses? Was she using substances? I would want to dig more into her past to get an idea of what might have led to this, and also maybe her childhood. I'd want to interview her directly, interview people that knew her, interview family members, do really a deep dive into her past, because as we know, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So there may be something in her past that leads us up to this point in time.
Now, by the way, so yes, these are all allegations at this point, and we're trying to make sense of it. She could easily fight this and say, she had no role in this. This is all being fabricated. She didn't do this. But as a footnote, there's also been reporting that on top of Hewitt's salary from the Department of Children and Families, Hewitt also had inherited a large sum of money from her mother and grandfather, who died, I believe, in 2018, and she reportedly purchased a $350,000 condo at some point in this case, but neighbors have said she was rarely ever seen there, which would make sense if she was seemingly living with this therapist as a foster child. But for now, Shelby Hewitt, she's out on a $5,000 bail. Her trial is scheduled for September. There's some reporting about whether or not they're working on a plea deal here. She was ordered to stay away from any witnesses in her case, all the schools, the Walden Behavioral Health Center, to refrain from practicing social work, and to have no contact with anyone under the age of 18. As for Miss Bernat and her partner, John Smith, they have been under intense scrutiny, clearly, but they have not faced any criminal charges in connection with this case. Dr. Bober, what are you looking for next in this case? Do you think we'll ever get an answer as to what's really going on here?
I think we're going to need to know more about Hewitt's past. Even though Bernat and her partner may not face criminal charges, Bernat herself may face an action against her license to practice social work because of these actions and because this isn't, to me, an obvious boundary violation. As far as Hewitt, I think that remains to be seen. What are we going to learn about her past actions, her past mental health history, her childhood? There's so many questions that still remain unanswered. But to me, this whole scheme is meeting some need. The act itself has to have meaning. It may be a pathological need, but there's something about it that she got some gratification from. Clearly, she didn't need money because we know about the inheritance, but the act itself, to me, does something for her and meets some need. And until we find out more about her past, we probably won't really understand that motivation.
And maybe it will take a plea deal. Maybe a plea deal will be put on the table. She pleads guilty to some or all of these charges. The sentence will be negotiated, but and then we'll get some answers. But what a disturbing case, disturbing allegations. It's, again, something I haven't seen before. Dr. Danielle Bober, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate your insight.
My pleasure.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.